guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be starting in with another build the deck video. Figured while we were getting into it, I would show off the little tiny cardboard box that comes with the Let's Play Eevee themed deck. It's perfect for holding a little 60 card play deck. And one of my favorite coins that comes with the Espeon GX Mega Box. Again, my absolute favorite coin. So if you bring that in and show that off while we were getting into it. So I decided I would do my deck video a little bit different than the way Mr. Sagrif does his videos. And that I would separate my trainers off and my energies and stuff like that. So figure we'll set them off in their little separate sections, and then we'll get into how much of each we use and all of that. So we'll just get those set up like that. And we'll start with trainers. So for trainers, I've got a fair few. I usually choose more item cards than supporters, since you can lay as many item cards as you want and you can only lay one supporter. I tend to go with as many card lays as possible. I also tend to go with a little bit more tool cards. They generally tend to add a little bit more protection to your cards or add extra damage, stuff like that. So they can be really handy. So the first trainer that I've got in here is the Bursting Balloon Trainer. It is a tool card, and what it does is at the end of your opponent's next turn, you discard the card, but if that opponent does any damage to you during their turn, it puts 6 damage counters right onto them. So I like to use this a little strategically. Sometimes husband won't necessarily use an attack that would be more damaging, especially if his Pokemon is 6 damage counters or less away from dying and he wants to get a chance to use it more often. So it can be beneficial for either protecting you a little bit more because your opponent will choose not to attack in the event of protecting themselves, or you could actually end up knocking out one of their Pokemon if they've happened to do any damage to you, even if they're knocked out. So I like to use that for just about anybody. Another trainer card, that's another tool card here, is Bent Spoon. Prevent all effects of your opponent's attacks except damage done to the Pokemon this card is attached to. Existing effects are not removed. So I like to try to slap this onto the Pokemon as quickly as I can, especially if my opponent is planning on using ones that confuse, poison, paralyze, or anything like that. Because this can basically stop them right dead in their tracks. And very often, Mr. Sagrif tends to use cards that will do more damage if I've been poisoned, or can only do damage if I've been poisoned or paralyzed, confused, other type effects. So this can actually be quite effective in preventing him from being able to use certain Pokemon at all, especially if the strategies are based around those certain effects. So, one of my favorite trainer cards to use, one of the absolute best in my opinion. So Focus Sash is perfect tool card to put onto fighting Pokemon. It allows them to basically get out of being knocked out with an extra 10 health. So basically it's like a last life in an arcade game. You would have that free life, so to speak. So it only gives you 10 health points, but sometimes, depending on the Pokemon, all you need is just one extra turn to make the whole game go differently. So this can be a very handy one for boosting a already fairly weak fighting Pokemon, which we all know can sometimes get into a deck, especially if it's a first stage, basic stage, and you need to get to the first stage for them to be more useful for you, which I do have in my deck. So you'll see where that kind of plays with the strategy for this deck a bit more. We've got the General Switch card, which everyone knows lets you switch your Pokemon with one from your bench, which can be handy for certain ones like Celesteela that have 4 retreat cost. Energy retrieval, put 2 basic energies from your discard pile into your hand. Super potion. This can be a really nice one to use if you don't have any energy attached to your Pokemon at the time. But you have to usually sacrifice an energy, but if it's better than sacrificing the Pokemon, then why not sacrifice an energy? Super Scoop Up lets you take everything, your Pokemon, any tool cards, energies, all of that, put them back into your hand. This one is coin dependent, so sometimes I have the best coin flips and Mr. Sagriff doesn't, so that can be pretty handy for me. But it doesn't always work, so strategic. Buddy Buddy Rescue lets you put Pokemon from your discard pile, you and your opponent. Opponent gets to choose first. So if you've got a discard pile and your opponent doesn't have a discard pile yet, or they've maybe only discarded energies and trainers, you can use this a little bit strategically and get to pull out one of your stronger Pokemon while maybe they don't have anybody to even pull out. So I like to kind of use that as an almost sneak attack, so to speak, especially if my game isn't going as well as I might like it to, or if maybe I lose a basic and would like to get him back so I can evolve. So Captivating Pokepuff. Your opponent reveals his or her hand. Put any number of basic Pokemon you find there onto your opponent's bench. I like to use this occasionally when he's using a lot of his decks that have the Gyarados, because I can get a full deck or full bench of his going with something like Magikarp. It can play well with a lot of the attacks I have going in this particular deck. So sometimes I like to try to know my opponent when I'm building my deck and know what kind of strategies they like to use, so I can try to put in some counter offensive whenever I can. Cherish Ball lets you search for a Pokemon GX, put it into your hand. You must shuffle your deck afterwards. This is pretty awesome when you know that your deck actually has a GX Pokemon that you want to go looking for. We've got a Howl that lets you draw 3 cards. Pokemon Fan Club, search for up to 2 basic Pokemon, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle. Like to use this especially when my hand ends up being filled with nothing but first stage Pokemon. You can go looking for the basics that go with those and kind of get yourself going a little bit in advance on what strategies you might be trying to use. Since this deck kind of revolves around a lot of first stage Pokemon, it's kind of nice to have a few of these, but for this one I tossed in 1, that way can definitely help to work with it. Cynthia. You'll notice that one of my Pokemon has an attack that does more damage if I've played Cynthia, so I deliberately added her in to go specifically with that Pokemon. But it's pretty handy regardless, because it lets you shuffle your hand and draw 6. Say you only have 2 or 3 cards in your hand, this can let you literally double the cards in your hand, and if you play it at the same time during that other Pokemon being in play, you can really do some extra damage. So it's a pretty nice strategy, but it doesn't always get to come out and work together. It really just depends on the luck of the draw, so to speak. So, still a really awesome trainer card to have, though. This one is another one of my favorite trainer cards, Tate and Liza. It's a supporter card and allows you to choose one of the 2 options. You can shuffle your hand into your deck, then draw 5 cards, or you can switch your active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. Very rarely do I choose to shuffle my hand into my deck unless I really just don't have anything that I can use at the time. But if I can get away with switching my Pokemon without having to use some of the higher retreat costs, I try to do that as often as I can, because it makes it a lot more effective for a lot of my strategies. And then one of my absolute top favorite supporter cards out of everything I've gotten so far, Brock's Grit. It's pretty old school art of the Brock's Grit. I've seen some of the newer ones that are pretty awesome looking. But this one still works the same as all of the other ones, and you get to shuffle 6 in any combination of Pokemon and basic energy cards from your discard pile into your deck. So, as we all know, getting more energy and getting back some of your basic Pokemon can be pretty handy. But as it doesn't state if it has to be a basic Pokemon or anything, it can be really useful for pulling out something like a GX and getting them maybe back out on the field if you get lucky. So, since we went through the trainers, figured now might be the perfect opportunity to toss in a little code card for you guys. This one's from Cosmic Eclipse, so you guys might get some of the absolute newest cards to be out there. So, go from there, and we'll start into the energy. The energies are fairly basic, but I do have a couple of special that I like to toss in. So, we'll start with the Rainbow Energy. If you don't already know what the Rainbow Energy does, it allows you to basically pick whatever energy type that you want it to count as. Now, the only downside that comes along with this is that you put one damage counter on your Pokemon when you do that. If you have something like one of the tool cards that allows you to have extra health, it can be really efficient. But when you want to choose which energy, because maybe that energy card's not coming out of your hand as often as you'd like, or you just need it for one specific attack, this can be extremely helpful. We've got a double colorless energy. I like to use this a lot because it allows me to have extra energy in my deck. And when having extra energy in your deck, it just is all around helpful. Because no matter how many times you lay an energy, sometimes you just need one extra on them and it just doesn't come out. So this can really cut down the cost. Then we've got our Strong Energy. It's attached to a fighting Pokemon and provides an extra 20 damage done to the opponent's active Pokemon for your fighting Pokemon. It's useless to add to anything else, so there's really not much point because it tells you that if it's attached to anything other than a fighting Pokemon, to discard it. So there's not much point in putting it on something that's not a fighting Pokemon. And with some of the fighting Pokemon having, say, 10 damage for their attacks, this can help really improve it, especially if maybe your opponent might be weak against it. So then, 2 Fighting Energy to complete for some of the other ones. 5 Psychic Energy. 5 Grass Energy. Try to keep it pretty simple. Now my fire I used as filler. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These I like to use for a lot of my more basic attacks. I never have to question if I've got to put that psychic energy on to somebody or anything like that. My fighting is always used for my colorless, my fire is always used for my colorless, and I always try to use something that's off of point from the Pokemon that I'm using. That way I know these are my discardable energies. I don't have to worry about running out of these ones and needing any more important ones later. And then this one I tossed in specifically for my Umbreon. So I only have one of those. So now we'll get into Pokemon. So we start with Spinda. And this one literally is only in here for its Uproar attack because it does 10 damage to all of the opponent's Pokemon, including bench. So it's a really nice one to strategize against with this one here. And I have 2 Meowths in this deck. They both do the same thing. And it does 50 damage to one of the opponent's Pokemon that has any damage counters on it. So I like to try to use this one with the other Uproar attack from Spinda. That way I can pick and choose some of the maybe weaker Pokemon that my opponent has on their bench and help myself win the game a little bit faster if I'm lucky. And having 2 of them means that if any of them get knocked out, I have a second backup chance. So we've got Virizion. Virizion has the Wrapped in Wind attack that does 30 and allows me to attach basic energy to this Pokemon. So it's a second chance to get extra energy out. And then this attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon, and that's Pike. It does 90 damage. So again, plays well with the bench attack. Allows me to really kind of pick and choose who I want to take out, so to speak. Maybe I completely avoid the active Pokemon and just pick off the ones he's trying to evolve in the background. We've got a Gengar EX. It's got a Night attack that lets me put 3 damage counters on one of the opponent's Pokemon. And then Dark Corridor does 60 damage. And your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned, and you switch this Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. I love being able to use this attack because I can pair this attack with any one of my attacks that I can choose damage or only does damage if the Pokemon is poisoned or damaged and stuff like that. That way it allows me to get basically a free retreat as well as picking maybe a better strategic Pokemon to have out and play at the time. And we've got Bronzor. He is only in here long enough to be able to evolve him to Bronzong. Bronzong has the Pain Amplifier. Put 3 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon that has any damage counters on it. That attack pairs well with the rest of the Pokemon we've seen so far because of that fact that this attack will only do any damage if they've already got damage on them. So, being able to pull Bronzong out right after having Gengar out allows us to be able to use this attack at all. Otherwise, he's just kind of a sitting duck and he's not really able to do as much. Especially as you've noticed, we didn't put any of this metal energy in here, so I didn't plan for this attack to be being used because it's a higher energy cost and more specific. We've got Eevee. Eevee is one of my favorite Pokemon because of the multiple abilities that come along with this Pokemon. So, this particular ability is Energy Evolution. When you attach a basic energy card from your hand to this Pokemon during your turn, you may search your deck for a card that evolves from this Pokemon that is the same type as that energy card and put it onto this Pokemon to evolve it, then shuffle your deck. So, that plays well specifically with this Dark Energy because if and when that comes out and I've got my Eevee out on my bench, it allows me to turn around and automatically find my Umbreon GX. So finding Umbreon automatically helps because it's only got 1 energy requirement for this strafe attack, and I may switch this Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. So if I wanted to, I could play this Umbreon, I could play my Gengar, and I could play it with something like my Meowth, and they can play very devastating together. And then the Shadow Bullet attack does 90, and it also does 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So, I can hurt the active Pokemon as well as the benched Pokemon at will. So it's a very great card for the strategy that goes with this deck. We've got a Skidoo. Same thing, Skidoo is in here long enough to get him evolved to Go-Goat. Go-Goat has the Overrun attack that does 30 damage to one of the opponent's benched Pokemon and 10 to the active Pokemon. It's basically the attack that was chosen when I picked him for this deck. And we've got Cacnea. And he's in here long enough for us to evolve to Cacturne. So, Poison Payback is his ability. If this Pokemon is your active Pokemon and is damaged by an opponent's attack, even if this Pokemon is knocked out, the attacking Pokemon is now poisoned. So, great to be able to use against them when they like to try to attack in any way, basically. It kind of is a backup protection for you, leaves them with some poison damage. And then the Feint attack. This attack does 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. This damage isn't affected by weakness, resistance, or any other effects on that Pokemon. So, having something that protects them isn't going to protect them using this card, and having the resistance isn't going to save them either. So it's pretty nice, and you get to choose, again, 50 health points. On something like a Ghastly here, that would be a knockout kill for sure. Now, Ghastly's in here for one of 2 reasons. One, its ability, Swelling Spite. When this Pokemon is knocked out, search your deck for up to 2 Haunter and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. So, if I get the opportunity to evolve from Ghastly to a Haunter beforehand, that's awesome. It gives me the chance of just having my Haunter. But, because he's such a low health Pokemon, it also gives me the opportunity to have 2 Haunter out on my bench that don't have to evolve from a Ghastly. So, I like to sometimes toss him out as the first Pokemon, knowing that there's a really good chance my opponent's going to knock him out in what's going to be maybe 1 or 2 hits. So, it can be really effective. And that Ghastly plays very well with the 2 Haunters that I have in here. They are the exact same. And he has the Sinister Fog attack. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. Put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So that can be really handy with the rest of the cards we've seen so far, that pretty much everybody that we have in play will do damage to just about everybody else that the opponent has in play. More cards in play for them, more damage counters get put on them, which means more opponents to choose other than just the active Pokemon. So we've got 2 of those in here. We've got Gligar. Gligar is one of the most useful basic Pokemon that I have in this deck. So he's got 70 health points, but his stun poison attack can be very, very, very devastating for the opponent. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed and poisoned. So not only does it poison them and continue to do damage, but they can't attack you the next turn around. If you have the good luck I happen to have sometimes with flipping coins, this can keep them from being able to do any damage. Now, he's in here for that attack, but he's also in here for the following attack that comes with him and his evolution. So, from Gligar we get Gliscor. Gliscor's finishing Stinger attack does 70 damage, but if your opponent's active Pokemon has no damage counters on it before this attack does damage, this attack does nothing. So, it can be pretty useless, but if you already have him poisoned and paralyzed before he gets evolved in here, then this can be very efficient because you can do 70 damage. But the Guillotine attack doing 90 is pretty efficient on its own. So all around, Gliscor is a pretty effective Pokemon with this strategy. We have Gible. He really is only in here long enough to evolve to his next stage, and upside is his attack is Ascension, which lets you search for a card that evolves from him and evolve it right then and there. So, from Gible, we evolve straight to Gabite whenever we can. And Gabite does 80 damage. He's got his Sand Tomb, does 20 damage. Has 80 health points, not 80 damage. The defending Pokemon can't retreat during your opponent's next turn, which can be very effective if you can get him out long enough to evolve him to your Garchomp. Garchomp does the Quick Dive, which does 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon, so goes well with everything else. And then we've got our Royal Blades attack. On its own it does 100, but then, if you played Cynthia from your hand during this turn, this attack does 100 more damage. So, you could end up doing 200 damage to the active Pokemon, which, for most of the lower ones, can pretty much wipe them right off, if you happen to play with the Cynthia. So that's why we've added Cynthia, the trainer card, right in for this specific guy right here. And the final card that we've got that we use a lot is the Celesteela GX. So right off, it's an Ultra Beast, and right off the hop it's got 200 health. It is a basic, which allows us to use it right off the hop, no evolutions necessary. Its ability is Force Canceller. As long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, prevent all effects of your opponent's GX attacks, including damage done to your Pokemon. So, that doesn't really do anything if your opponent doesn't have any GX or isn't using any GX cards at all. But the moment that they have a GX in play, it prevents all of these attacks from doing anything to you. So that can be pretty nice if you have some opponents that have some pretty devastating GX attacks. So, this one only has one attack, but it's a devastating attack. Power Cyclone. It does 110 damage, and then you get to move an energy from this Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon. I love to have Celesteela out and play and being able to toss on a specific energy. So I could have my Eevee out on my bench. I could have Celesteela out as my active one. Toss on something like my Dark Energy and automatically go searching for my Umbreon with my Eevee and know that I can strategically place whichever energies I need to so that I can always be stacking up energy and have a whole bench full of ready active Pokemon for if I happen to get a switch card, because look at that retreat cost. That is an insane retreat cost right there. So this is why we have switch cards and Tate and Liza that let us switch our Pokemon for free. And being able to use this one here with somebody like Gengar or Umbreon that let you switch and choose, you can kind of get around having all that retreat cost right there. So the Discovery GX attack, or the GX attack on him is the Discovery GX. And what it does is it lets you count your prize cards, put them into your hand. Then take as many cards from the top of your deck and put them face down as your prize cards. If you don't have that many cards in your deck, this attack does nothing. So, that's a pretty handy one to be able to use if you've already maybe used one of your other trainer cards that lets you search your deck for something. And maybe you found out, hey, I put my Dark Energy on my Eevee and I found out that my Umbreon isn't in my deck. Well, that's really devastating to me because I really wanted to use Umbreon and now I can't. So maybe if I get Celesteela out and I get to use my Discovery GX attack, I can take my prize cards knowing for sure what is going to be in there. So that can be pretty handy, but I don't always get a chance to use it because I like to only use it if I've searched my deck and know that there's something locked behind my prizes that I really, really need. So, since we're getting to the end of her, we will give away another code card for you lovely people. So that's where we're going to leave it for today. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Like, comment down below. Dislike if you didn't like anything. Comment down below and let us know what maybe you did or didn't like. If you guys maybe like the way that Mr. Sagriff does his videos better than the way I do my videos, or vice versa, comment down below, same thing. Hit the notification bell if you guys like getting the code cards as early as possible. That way you can always be the first person back for whenever we upload a new video. We always try to toss in a couple of code cards for you guys. So hopefully you guys enjoyed watching through this Build-A-Deck. Thanks for watching and have a nice day. See you guys later. Bye.